if I walked out right now and offered somebody $5,000 worth of equity in the company or $5,000 cash, 100% of the time they'll take the cash.
Welcome to 99 Humans. My name is Jeff LaCosta, curious coach and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, striving to understand how little things generate big impact.
And I'm Nadia Carta, tech executive and lifestyle coach with a mission to transform lives and corporations by kindling hearts to generate a zeal for life.
Each week, we investigate stories about the human side of leadership to re-energize your spirit and help you become a stronger leader.
Because the reality is that leadership is messy, goofy, challenging, but always human.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Let's dive in. Our guest today is the multi-talented Nick Lindsay. Nick graduated from the Naval Academy with my brother, and actually last year we had an unforgettable mountaineering trip in Alaska where Nick and his brother joined me and my brother for the complete opposite experience of my day-to-day job.
Whoa, Jeff. You say unforgettable, and I've heard some of these stories.
Yeah, honestly, let's just say Nick and my wilderness survival skills are on opposite ends of the spectrum. We were asked to tie into this rope to traverse crevasses, and I did bunny ears the first time we had to tie in, which is not the appropriate knot to use.
Yeah, I shouldn't be laughing, but I can't wait to hear the story. Nick works in aerospace and the space industry. I'm so excited about this conversation with him today because Nick's old boss was Mr. Elon Musk, and we all know how actual it is.
Stick around until the end to hear our reflections. And Nick, welcome to 99 Humans.
Hey, Jeff.
Nick, hello.
Hey, Brad, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Nadia, nice to meet you as well.
It's so nice to meet you, Nick.
Nick and I are friends through my brother. Nick was in the Navy with my brother, went to the Naval Academy. But maybe the coolest thing most recently, Nick and I were in Alaska. So Nadia has heard a lot about this Alaska adventure. And here's someone in the flesh who lived through it and survived this awesome experience.
Look, I know today's podcast is about everything else, but as I start training for my Spartan next year, maybe I want to hear a little bit about Alaska.
Yeah, it was amazing. Honestly, I think Jeff gets the MVP award for the Alaska trip because, like, he was a bit out of his element, but you could never tell. Like, whatever it was, he just dug in and did it. And I was like, oh, you must have done this 1,000 times. That was
That's
like
the biggest lie ever.
Jeff didn't tell me anything about Alaska. He only said it was hard and then didn't give me any details. So I have big FOMO and I want more details.
Yeah, or we could talk about that after if you'd like.
Yeah, amazing time. Nick, I know we have you for a limited window and you're calling in from across the world. Is it before you get started with work or where are you on your day?
It's 8 a.m. here, so I just got to work and grabbed the kitchen, actually.
Where are you located in the world?
We're in Australia.
Nice. That's
Yeah,
queued up for that question.
That's right. Actually, this is where we take our employee pictures. Something like that for the badges.
You could make a good badge out of that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's technically Helensvale, but it's close to Brisbane, Australia, just south of Brisbane.
So when you say your employees, I'm going to ask a basic question. I know Jeff knows you, but where do you work? What do you do for life?
Yeah, so we work at a company called Gilmore Space Technologies, and we are a launch service provider and satellite/aerospace manufacturer. So basically, like, our primary goal right now is building Australia's very first orbital rocket. They've never built their own orbital class rocket. Just on the other side of that wall, we have two 23-meter, which now I have to convert. You probably speak meters, actually. So it's 23 meters long, and it's 2 meters in diameter, and it weighs about 34 tons liftoff.
I'm like, speaking for normal people, what a cool job.
It is. It's awesome. Yeah. My role, I'm the chief of staff, which is a little bit of a weird role. And there's a bit of a background as to why. So I was hired in as the head of manufacturing, but the U.S. State Department actually came in about a year after I started and said, that I have too much technical experience and they are not comfortable with a US citizen supporting a foreign country developing rockets. And so overnight, I had to go from, I was program manager of launch vehicles at the time and switch to a role that I invented called chief of staff, which is everything except for the stuff I'm not allowed to do.
It's incredible. And Nadia, Nick is one of the most fascinating, interesting people that you'll ever meet, no doubt. From, Naval Academy to SpaceX to now Australia and other adventures in between. Nick, I know that you are prepped for this conversation, but Nadia and I are kind of on this journey of talking to leaders about tearing down the facade of what it really means to be a people leader and to get into the messy, funny, emotional sometimes, but far less just clean cut strategic. Let's talk about our leadership philosophy kind of stories and more hearing what's it really like out there.
Yeah, fair enough. I've got plenty of examples.
I mean, already you dropped a huge bomb, which is, I came here to do this job, and guess what? Day 2, they said I was American, I couldn't do it. Here you go, I had to invent my job. Are you on a visa there? So are they sponsoring you? And so you also were terrified that they were sending you home.
So I am really lucky. We came over on a temporary resident visa, which was a 4-year visa centered around skills shortages in Australia. So they just don't have enough people and enough experience to keep advanced companies like ours going. And so they import a lot of talent. So I came over on a 4-year visa, and coincidentally, just 3 months after we came over, they released a new program for permanent residency called the Global Talent Independent Visa. And it has multiple streams based on the industries they're trying to attract globally, internationally recognized individuals into. And one of those streams was space and advanced manufacturing. And my last job was the head of manufacturing for the Dragon spacecraft at SpaceX. So it was like purpose written for my
custom built for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very easy. It was actually.
Did you pick up the name? Dragon?
Dragon. No, so Dragon is the name of a spaceship. So I was the director of Dragon manufacturing, Dragon production. Yeah.
I love dragons. I'm all about House of Dragons and Game of Thrones, so that's why Dragon really hit me. But this is awesome. Oh my God.
Yeah. But on the visa side, so it actually ended up being a 3-day process. So I submitted all my paperwork because I just had it from when I did the temporary resident visa. And the only extra thing was a medical, essentially. And so I submitted my medical on a Monday and heard back on the Wednesday that we had permanent residency. So now my wife
you're
and
now
I
permanent residents of Australia.
Yeah, we can stick around as long as we want. Between you and me, I don't know how long we'll stay, maybe another couple of years, but I miss a lot of things about the U.S.
So Nick, you mentioned having plenty of stories to pick from on what it's really like to work with other people out in the world. Would love to hear one of those stories and then we can unpack it.
Sure. I think speaking at a higher level, the transition moving from the U.S. and the culture and enthusiasm of the US to Australia, that whole experience has been a little bit eye-opening. I guess the biggest change is the work ethic and the cultural norms of achievement. So in the US, we grow up and maybe it's confidence, maybe it's arrogance, but I genuinely believe that I could do anything I wanted in life. And as long as I worked hard, paid my dues, put in the time, put in the effort, that I could achieve great things. And I thought that was normal. I don't know, Jeff, it seems like you probably had a similar experience. Your parents are awesome and we're encouraging you and Pat along to go and do great things. But coming to Australia, the cultural norm is much more suppressed. There's a lot of caution placed on young kids to just stay in their lane, seek a comfortable existence, don't try to stand out from the crowd. There's something called a tall poppy syndrome here that's really pervasive. It works 2 ways. So when there is a tall poppy or an organization that's incredibly successful, people are really quick to try to cut them down and prove that they're not worthy of whatever recognition they're getting. And so it's a really strong demotivator for people to be standout individuals and try to achieve something abnormal. And when you look at it from the kids' perspective, where teachers and parents are not encouraging risk taking and pursuing a passion, they're encouraging you to find a comfortable, like decent paying job so you'll be comfortable your whole life. Like that seems to be the crowning achievement here. And so working at a startup where we need the standout individuals to make this company stand out and deliver more in less time than has ever been delivered before, it's really hard to find those people. And they're out there, and I think we've been lucky to capture a lot of them, especially in this area, but it's a totally different mindset. And even the really high performing individuals that we're lucky enough to bring into the team, they tend to have a bit of the imposter syndrome where they don't believe that they deserve to be part of an organization that's achieving something so amazing and really changing the landscape for Australia. They struggle with it from a mental health perspective even. And so we put in a little bit of effort. I'm responsible for work health and safety among other teams here. And we put some effort into just talking about that and making it okay that you don't feel like you belong in the position. I know I've certainly experienced that in a lot of the roles that I moved into, but I never let it slow me down, I guess. I just faked it till I made it and tried harder. But yeah, it's just a different culture, different mindset here.
I'm getting very emotional because this is the culture you grew up in Europe as well. And
Yeah.
Jeff and I had many conversations about this, and gosh, it's so hard. And you, kudos to you that you're getting not to tackle this. It's very difficult.
It is. We've gone so far as to modify our position descriptions. And I came from SpaceX, an extremely high performing organization where everybody was putting in 50 hours is like the normal work week. And if you had an 80-hour work week, it was like, yeah, you worked pretty hard that week. And if you worked 40 hours, you must have taken a couple of days off type of thing. And it's just what I was used to. And I was there for not over 9 years. So I didn't really know even that there was a different way to work. You work hard, you make it your hobby, you make it your passion, and you deliver great things. And then, yeah, coming here, it was immediately apparent that was not the normal expectation. But so in Chief of Staff, I'm also responsible for human resources and recruiting. And I drafted a lot of our initial position descriptions to be very demanding. Like, we expect amazing work ethic and experience in all of these areas, and really set the bar high in almost an effort to weed out the people that were on the verge of applying but weren't really sure if they had the motivation and drive to be successful, so that we would get those that were going to be driven to be successful. But what I inadvertently did, I think, is scared away qualified candidates who probably would work hard, but had been told their whole life not to stand out and not to try to be the overachiever. And so we overhauled all of our position descriptions to say, instead of having a laundry list of mandatory requirements, we backed that down to just a very minimum set and said, move them into the desired skills and experience, and said, we understand that you might not have all of these skills, but please throw your name in the hat anyway. Let us get a look at your resume and talk to you and figure out if you've got all the soft skills that we're looking for, to really expand the pool and hopefully pick up on the maybe less confident but more capable individuals. And it does actually impact women more than it does men. There was a study done where women were known to apply for a role if they qualified for 95% of the job requirements, whereas men will apply if they only qualify for about 60%. And so we wanted to capture more women and people from underrepresented populations and get their names into the mix as well. So yeah, softening up our position description in Australia made a big difference, and I think actually improved the overall quality of the candidates, because we were just capturing more people and able to pick the cream of the crop.
I think it's fascinating that you're for those who make it through this hiring process in charge of leading, the well-being and kind of wellness piece of what it's like to work there afterwards? You mentioned imposter syndrome is something that you're starting to talk more about. I'm curious if there's an experience that you've noticed with somebody where this has been a challenge and you've had to talk with them about navigating through that process within their current job.
There have been a number of people, honestly, and it always comes down to reminding them that we didn't hire them, especially in Australia, in the space industry. There is no space experience here. So when we hire an Australian into a space company, we have to remind them that we're not hiring them to be the expert in the industry. We know they don't know anything potentially about orbital dynamics and rockets or whatever else, but if we're hiring them for their fundamental skill set. So do they have a good attitude? Can they pass the LA to Sydney test? Would I want to sit next to them on an airplane for 15 hours and have a conversation with this person? And then do they have the fundamental skills? So obviously for an engineer, an engineering degree, we don't really care that much what the engineering degree is in. It's just evidence that you can solve hard problems and time manage and work really hard and be a part of a team if they're a member of a senior design project. And so reminding them of all those underlying foundational skills that are the reason why we selected them, and because they have a high potential. Like we saw something in them that we believe they have a high ceiling and will contribute to the team. If they are struggling with that feeling of not belonging, reminding them that we picked them because we think they do belong is sometimes enough to just break that cycle, and they go, oh yeah, sorry, let me get back to solving problems for this
I
company.
have a follow-up question on this concept because this is fascinating. I love the fact that you say LA to Sydney test. You pass it, yes or no, and this reminder. I guess that what I'm wondering is these people, once you get them in, they don't report to you anymore, right? They go and work with other managers.
Yep.
And so somehow you almost need to keep accountable those managers that they then keep the motivation with those people. So
Yeah.
how do you go by having your influence on the managers so that they grow that muscle in really changing that behavior and say, hey, you know what? There's no ceiling, only the ceiling that you create for yourself. So how do you scale your being American, right, of everything is possible
Yeah.
to reach as many as possible?
It's really challenging, to be honest. Our overall strategy has been to hire in mid to senior level managers on the engineering side with a bit of experience. And that way we have some really experience gained through failure within the company, because that's really where you learn the most. And with those mid-level managers, we hire in undergraduate engineers who can train under them and learn from them. But keeping a really positive leadership culture is a really big challenge. And there's a lot of different, as you guys know better than most, there's a lot of different leadership strategies and approaches. So one thing we've started doing recently is having a leadership 101 for new leaders. So anybody who's it's their first time leading, we'll sit them down. We have a co-working space that we pop over to and say, here are the fundamental expectations. You're now responsible for your team's well-being, which includes work health and safety and leave requests and tracking timesheets and all of that other administrative stuff. But then it's also, we need those individuals to be an extension of the culture we're trying to create in the company, where it's a very collaborative, not competitive environment, and we're all striving towards achieving the same vision and mission for the company. And it's had good results. There's varying degrees of natural leadership ability, I think, and some people pick up on it faster than others. But overall, at least sitting in the same room with the CEO and the CFO and my HR manager and saying, this is what we expect out of you as a leader in this company, at least we're all starting from the same foundation.
What do you find typically makes it hard for managers to kind of be that maybe ultimate version, like, the textbook incredible manager?
The hardest thing, I think, is leaning too much on positional authority and not having the patience to use emotional convincing to get people to go in the direction you want to go. So the managers that come in and say, boom, I'm the lead now, I'm the manager now, this is the direction we're going because I say so, that's where you immediately have a head-to-head relationship between the employee and the manager, and then inevitably they come and complain to me as the chief of staff or to my HR manager and go, my manager is a jerk, they're not letting me do what I want to do. And there's some sort of, usually it's a misalignment of expectations somewhere, and a lot of times it just boils down to communication. But the managers that can step in and have earned the respect of their team over time have competency in the technical skills that their team is doing. So if it's a manager of the welding department, for example, you want someone with some background in welding and hopefully able to step in and coach and mentor and have really strong soft skills. But if you take your highest performing welder and stick them in a leadership role because they're the highest performing welder, it might not be the right fit. And I see that a lot in small, high-performing organizations. They'll take your best mechanical engineer and make them a mechanical engineer.
Oh, we're doing it in big organizations too, that's for sure.
It's a common problem, but the soft skills are far more important. So another thing I did, and I stole this, ripped it from the SpaceX playbook, but we created really clear growth paths for individual contributors as well as people leaders. Strong individual performers didn't feel cornered into becoming a people leader just for career progression. So we have a senior principal and distinguished engineer roles. And the distinguished engineer role is, like it says, the guy who wrote the book on the thing, right? So if you have written a guidance, navigation, and control textbook, yeah, you're probably worthy of being a distinguished engineer. But we truly wanted to make it a long-term career goal for someone who maybe didn't want to or wasn't capable of serving in a people managing role.
Are you interested in becoming a chief of staff at Google by any chance?
I'm always
Because,
open
other
to
things you're
not-
saying, I'm like, oh, it feels like a balm on my heart. Because that's how it should be. Not everyone is born to be a leader. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Not everyone should even try to be, because you can be a leader without managing people in your field and fly with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have in the little flow chart that I made to illustrate the idea of the career, we have lines intentionally drawn in weird directions, just showing that, yeah, you could potentially go from a senior engineer role that you're not leading people and then jump over to an engineering manager role, try it for a bit and go, nope, I don't like it, and jump backwards. It's fine. Like, all of that is fine. And I think people, I don't know, they place a lot of emphasis on titles and positions in line with their self-worth. And I would like to smash that just a little bit and figure out how we can extract the most value out of the individual, because I think then they'll feel more fulfilled anyway.
To Nadia's point, what you're sharing really is inspiring to see how you're creating such a amazing workplace. And the fact that this stemmed 25 minutes ago from you saying, gosh, when I got here, there was a big cultural difference that I noticed. I want to rewind to that moment of noticing that there's a pretty big divide in what you thought the culture would be and now what you've taken upon yourself to create the culture within the company.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to realize, oh my gosh, this is going to be really different than I expected?
Yeah. So I can tell you the exact moment I figured it out. So it was like, I think it might have been my first day where, like I said, at SpaceX, the lights were always on. If you wanted to work till midnight, you could work till midnight. You'd have a company with you there at the office getting stuff done. So here in the building I'm in right now, day one, the then COO walked through the office at 5 p.m. and started turning the lights off. And I was like, what is happening? Is there an emergency? Do we need to
5
evacuate?
p.m.
He's like, all right, great job, everyone. Let's get out of here. And I was like, what is going on?
This is different.
This is different. Yeah. So that was the moment. And then I've been here for 3.5 years almost. And so many conversations with my wife, Amy, about, holy cow, this is so different. What do we walk ourselves into? And she's doing incredibly well also. She's a production manager at a company that was manufacturing COVID tests. And so she's been incredibly busy and is noticing a lot of the same behaviors and cultural aspects that I am. So I know it's not just Gilmore Space, it's not just aerospace, it's Australia, or at least the state we live in is Queensland. And I think Queensland is known as an agricultural and tourism state. So there's theme parks and beautiful beaches, and it's just a little bit more relaxed than some of the other states. Like, it is not your upbeat Sydney, which is probably more like a San Francisco, Melbourne, Adelaide. It's a bit more, I think actually the license plate says relax, it's Queensland.
If you're looking for friends, I would love to send you to my sister-in-law. She lives in Cairns.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be amazing. I have one question for you. I know we're approaching the end. This is a difficult question. We can see if we're going to keep it or cut it later. But as a European that moved to the US, even now, only 2 years and a half later, because of the exact things you said, I won't go back to Europe.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I want to stay here. I want to grow my daughters as in whatever you want to achieve in life is possible. You want to be a Broadway star? You can be a Broadway star.
Do it. Yeah.
So my question for you now is, what keeps you there? You could hop on a flight and go back to your comfortable America and achieve probably the CEO of SpaceX. You could do whatever you would want to do. What is keeping you there?
It's a good question. And I talk a lot about that with Amy, my wife. Like, why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? I didn't join Gilmore Space because I had an incredible passion for Australia having sovereign launch capability, or Gilmore Space achieving great things in aerospace. We moved to Australia for the adventure. We wanted to come, we wanted to try something new. I thought that in a smaller organization, I would have a lot of influence on the success or the failure of the company over the coming years, and saw it as a really awesome growth opportunity. So even though I have been side shuffled into a non-technical role for now, I am trying to take some steps to get back to a technical role, but I'm learning a ton. So I'm managing human resources, which includes recruiting and all of the fun that goes along with that. Work health and safety, which Australia and Queensland in particular is a very risk-averse country, state. So the legislation around work health and safety it's pretty overkill, if you ask me. So that's been a learning experience. I'm also responsible for the legal team, including some governance and our equity program. So help to try to shape that and use that as a tool for motivation, which that's a whole nother story because it's just not as popular in Australia. So no one values it. And if I walked out right now and offered somebody $5,000 worth of equity in the company or $5,000 cash, 100% of the time they'll take the cash. There's just no realization of the potential future value here. We're doing some training on that as well.
Can you train me? Because I would take the cash too.
Well, it depends on the company, but Tex is absolutely an outlier. They have been exceptionally successful, and that's not the norm. I wouldn't expect that, but it's, if you have a promising technology and demand for that technology in a country and no competition, it's almost impossible to lose. So even if the company only doubles, triples, or 10x's, it's still awesome. That's still an amazing result. SpaceX has something like, I don't know, over 10 years or 15 years, 350x or something crazy. So I don't expect that, but people just they don't understand. They don't understand how a company is structured, how it's owned, how the value increases when they put in additional hours and work. Anyway, we do a whole topic on that one. But
I mean,
yes,
Jeff, if you want, we can invite Nick back because, look, my observation, and I would love to hear actually from Jeff, is that no one ever taught me what equity was. I don't even know what a share was before joining Google, and I joined Google at 26. So I think you guys in America especially, you have such a fortune that you grow up with an incredible financial literature, and that brings you then in life to be more prone to bets. Because right now, like, you know what, like, it cannot mess up with it. We're gonna succeed. Would love to hear more from you. And how can we?
There's a perspective I feel like that we need to talk about, which I'll give maybe the devil's advocate, and then Nick, I'd love to hear your response, which is, you can achieve great things. There is no ceiling other than your own. I think that is objectively fabulous. 80-hour work weeks, work until midnight, like there's a lot of this that doesn't feel awesome to me. And I'm curious, Nick, kind of how do you, like fully Americanizing is always a double-edged sword. So how
Yep.
are you thinking about being
Very true.
strategic and creating this culture where you're like, let's take the good parts, but
Yep.
maybe try and avoid some of the toxic, because SpaceX is also kind of a notorious place for a pretty tough work culture where the fact that you were there for more than 9 years is incredible. I mean, a lot of people burn fast at SpaceX.
Yeah. I think the average employee tenure was somewhere around 3 to 5 years, and they get a lot out of people in 3 to 5 years. The reality is, to achieve things at the pace that they're achieving them, we had to work smarter and harder. Like, you have to do both. And so multiplying your progress by working twice the number of hours in a work week, or 1.5 times the number of hours in a work week. And then you're further multiplying your progress because you're being as efficient as you possibly can be, eliminating bureaucracy to try to make the most out of every single one of those hours. So that is why they are economically successful. I agree that it wasn't great at times. Like, I can honestly say I probably saw Amy for a handful of hours per week for 6 months. And that was around a really intense period of time when SpaceX had a launch failure, and I was on the anomaly investigation team. So spending a lot of time just working with the team to dig through data and figure out what happened. I'm not saying that's a great plan, but I think if we can structure the work here very aggressively, so maybe, let's say, give the team 3 weeks worth of work to finish in 2 weeks, and then really try to hold them accountable to that. I honestly don't care if they can get it done in 38 hours, which is the standard work week in Australia, or if it takes them 50. But it's more important that we're hitting milestones. So I've really tried to emphasize with my team, my direct reports, the outcomes over the hours. And I think COVID has also pushed us and opened my eyes to the fact that it may not matter if the hours are happening at work or at home or late at night, early in the morning. It really doesn't matter as long as the outcomes are happening at an aggressive pace. And it's harder to manage that way. You have to be more comfortable being uncomfortable because you don't have maybe eyes on your team or the regular hourly check-ins on what's going on. But I think extending that trust to the team is usually returned back in the form of delivery of progress or communication where they can't for whatever reason. So I don't know, I guess it's a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, I don't think an 80-hour work week is sustainable. I don't think it's necessary in most cases. Maybe there's an exception where there's a launch failure and you really need to figure out what happened. But for the most part, I think a 40 to 50-hour work week is a good work week. And for me personally, I've been very fortunate enough to find roles where the work can become a hobby. So I really don't feel like I'm going to work just for a paycheck. I'm going to progress a thing that I think is really cool. And that, for me at least, makes it easy, and is often what I found with the SpaceX engineers. Definitely. Here I'm a little bit more distant now from the engineering teams, but we had to encourage them to go home more often than we had to encourage them to stay. And so that's another kind of different thing to balance as a manager, is recognizing when the team is stuck in a job because they just want to keep going, but it may not be necessary. And for their own well-being, you might have to say, hey, look, you've already put in 12 hours, call it a day, go get some rest, go to the beach, do what you need to do. We'll see you again later tomorrow.
What I'm interiorizing, because I'm with Jeff, that we don't want to promote a poisoning work lifestyle, especially in this moment where we're finally focusing on work and well-being. But what I'm grasping, it's all about being far away from polarizing. If we, on one hand, we say laziness almost, and non-motivation, and then on the other side, workaholic, I'm working 80 hours a week. What is a good middle way so that you're motivated, you work for milestones, and work doesn't feel like a chore but you're passionate about. That's what I'm gonna bring home from this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's true, but it's going to be different for every person. And it's also going to be different as you go through stages of your life. A young 20-year-old with no responsibilities can put in 80 hours and probably not think twice about it. But when you have a family and you have kids and you have other responsibilities, it's a bit tougher to make that realistic. And there's also other competing priorities in your life later on, whereas early on, work is it, especially if you find a job that you're particularly passionate about. It's, yes, this is awesome, getting paid to change the world. This sounds amazing. And that was SpaceX for me for the longest time. They're paying me to come in and change aerospace, the face of aerospace, really forever. But yeah, now I'm a little bit older, and my wife and I are trying to have a kid. And so there are other things that are just more important. And that's okay, and it's natural. And I think a good manager can recognize and work with the spectrum of their team to figure out how to get the most value out of them while still hitting whatever their deliverables are. But it's not easy, and it's far easier said than.
It's a pretty cool day where you get to talk to somebody who has an aspiration to change the world with their career, and you did it. Like, does it feel that way? Like it does, like you were a part of something that really did change the world.
Yeah, I feel incredibly lucky. It was not strategic of me. It was not an intentional decision to say, I'm going to join SpaceX. We're going to change the world. I was exiting the active duty Navy, moving to the reserves. There was a really cool job available in Waco, Texas, which happened to be near where I was based in Kingsville. I remember reading the job description, and it was something like, are you an engineer that likes to be outdoors and work with your hands and turn wrenches and get muddy? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So
I would have been like, no.
yeah, so I was sold right then and there. And I applied for probably 85 or so jobs at that time. And there were only two companies that I got interviews with. One was SpaceX and one was 7-Eleven. And 7-Eleven actually said, no, we're not interested in you being a regional manager. So it was honestly lucky.
The universe works out.
The universe works, yeah, in mysterious ways. But look, the team I was on was absolutely incredible. Really young, extremely intelligent, highly motivated people. The culture at the company is something that I have not seen anywhere else. It's, I guess, the most important aspect of it, in my opinion, was the authority and responsibility was delegated as low as practically possible. As a 25-year-old engineer, I was running a test site that had really dangerous, will kill you, drop, one drop of chemical in the room will kill you, that type of chemicals, and had very minimal oversight. We were trained well. We knew what we were doing. We had the authority to make smart financial decisions, smart safety decisions for the company. And because we knew what the company's singular mission was, to put mankind on Mars, every single decision we made was almost black and white. Will this take us closer to Mars, or will it push us further away from Mars? And if you could simplify it in that way, it made everything just tell you, I was very lucky to be a part of that team. They have continued to just absolutely dominate the competition. And yeah, we'll be lucky to help support their objective to put mankind on Mars.
What a signature closing. Putting mankind on Mars. I don't know, Jeff, how many other guests will
I know, right? Yeah, this is one to beat. Nick, we've been asking, and kind of maybe as a parting thought, when you reflect on the story and kind of the conversation that you shared with us today, what advice do you have for other leaders out there as they think about navigating this idea of creating an intentional culture that helps people take the ceiling off of what they can do?
As I'm making decisions or recommendations on how to shape the culture here, I'm really just thinking about the type of company that I would be motivated to get out of bed and go and do work for. And so simple things like, do we make the snack closet available for the team? So if they run out of snacks in the kitchen, they can go grab more, or do we lock it? I want to work for the company that trusts me to go and grab some extra snacks and restock the snack bin. And so it is really those like little decisions that are like cultural tweaks. And if you can pay attention to that level of detail and really create an environment where people can thrive and be excited to come to work and contribute to the overall objectives, I think you'll get more out of the team.
I'm
I
getting
love that.
very emotional.
It makes me think about all the different things that I want to tweak on my team. And, like, oh gosh, these are
Yeah.
little things that, you're right, speak volumes about what the culture is.
Yeah, like a lot of it comes down to trust. And it's hard sometimes, especially for founders of a small business, to start to trust people who aren't in their immediate circle with the success and steering of their company. And some do better than others with it. But yeah, if we can trust our employees 99% of the time, we'll get that trust back. Of course, there's always a bad egg here or there. And it's also really important to legally exit those bad eggs because they're just cancerous to the rest of the organization.
Huge thank you, Nick. Amazing conversation. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, they're
So
just
worth it.
stories and experience for now. I have a lot more to learn, that's for sure. But it's been great chatting with you guys, and yeah, always love catching up with you, Jeff.
Yeah, you too. Thank you again.
Yeah, of course.